Hey folks, welcome back to Mark Kelly Farm. It's a nice cool morning out here this morning. We got our first frost of the season, and we'll go show you what it did to the garden. We've got some major devastation out there. The night before the frost, we took our two tomatoes, cherry tomatoes that we had in the tub, and we put them in here in the greenhouse. They did not die. I need to fertilize them up though, give them some nutrients. Let's go out and see what it did to the garden. This, folks, is what frost will do to your tomato plant. Just absolutely destroys them. And it's kind of sad because I was looking forward to getting these bigger tomatoes finally. We've been getting cherry tomatoes, but not a lot of the bigger tomatoes. And then here's our pepper plants. Frost pretty much toasted them as well. But there's a lot of usable jalapenos on here. These peppers are still nice and firm. And we're going to actually pick all these and use them. But of course, all of the kale and the broccoli and cauliflower, they'll take a little bit of frost. They're fine. But I can show you the melon plants have all died down. All the winter squash has all died down. This is natural for winter squash. The frost kills the plants and it'll dry up, and then you just go in there and harvest all of the winter squash. Doesn't hurt the squash themselves a bit. Now we still got a bunch of cantaloupe over here and a couple watermelons out. I've heard that the cantaloupes will be fine. It'll actually make them a little bit sweeter. And those couple big watermelons, we'll take those in. They should be fine for eating right away. But the real loss to me is our habanero pepper plants here. I had big plans for the habaneros, but you can see the plants are toast. But if you remember, we got, I don't know, maybe half a pound of them or so the other night. See a couple more down there I can grab. But we had big plans of making my buddy Arnie's hot sauce this year. But it doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of it made. But we're going to try to do a small batch. And when we do that, we'll show you how we do that. But I'm going to pick these jalapenos and some of these green tomatoes, and we're going to do a salvage operation, and we're going to show you how to make something with it. You can see our artichokes made it through the frost as well. Maybe these will do okay if we continue getting some warm weather. Maybe we'll get an artichoke. Well, it just goes to show you, folks, that's why you can and do all the other stuff for preservation when you have the abundance, because there's going to be times that you don't. Our tomato season this year is pretty much a bust, so we're lucky. We have probably 20 quarts still of tomatoes down in the root cellar from last year, and that's going to be a plus. All right, we've rescued a bunch of our green tomatoes from the garden, and we're going to make some green taco sauce out of these. These are almost interchangeable with tomatillos. They got a real tangy flavor to them. And we're going to use some of these jalapenos too that we rescued out of the garden. And I'll show you later what I'm going to do with the ones we don't use. So I've got these all washed. I need to trim them up and dice them up, and we'll put them in the pot. All right, we've got 4 pounds of our green tomatoes. We got them cored. We cut any blemishes off. You can see one of them was starting to turn red already, but that won't hurt nothing. So we're going to get the fire underneath these. I put about a half a cup of water in the pot just to get the liquid starting to boil. And then as this heats up, we're going to put a lid on it. We're going to go take care of our peppers. So to the pot now, we're adding a half a pound of our jalapenos. I just washed them, cut the stems off, and then just cut them into small little rings, seeds and all. And that may seem like a lot of peppers, but when you cook the jalapeno peppers, it develops some of the sugars in them, and they don't stay quite as hot. Now, if you like it hotter, you could throw in a couple habaneros or just more jalapenos if you'd like. But with the seeds and the cores and all that in there, it'll be plenty warm. All right, the next thing we're going to add to the mix is 6 tablespoons of our dried onions. If you don't want to use the dry onions, you can use 2 whole onions just diced up. We also use a tablespoon of sugar, tablespoon of salt, and we're going to do a 1/4 cup of olive oil. We're going to dump all that into the pot right now. I can hear it, it's already starting to boil in there. So we're going to put the lid back on that and measure out our next ingredient. So the final ingredients are a cup of white vinegar, plain white vinegar, and we're going to add a tablespoon of our dry cilantro flakes. If you don't have the cilantro flakes, you could use maybe a teaspoon of coriander. Would probably be pretty good in this. I can already smell those tomatoes cooking down. Alright, I'm going to stir this up and we're going to let this cook down. So with the rest of our peppers, I got them in the sink. I've got them all cleaned up. And we're actually going to ferment some peppers because we're going to make some fermented hot sauce in the future. I've got a couple quart jars here, glass jars. We're going to make 2 different kinds. We're going to make a jalapeno hot sauce. And we're going to take whatever habaneros we were able to get from the garden. And we're going to make a habanero hot sauce. But we're going to ferment them first. If you've ever had like Tabasco hot sauce or something like that, they ferment their peppers for, it's a long time for the Tabasco. I think it's a year or 2 before they actually use the pepper pulp and make the hot sauce. But if you've never fermented before, it's a fantastic flavor. It really develops the flavors and it makes them nice and sour. You don't need the vinegar either. And we have our Mason Tops Fermentation Kit. Fairly inexpensive. If you've never fermented before, I recommend this kit. It's really good. It's got everything you need except the jar and the screw bands for the lids. Everything else is in there. We've made some sauerkraut already, which we've done before, but it's super easy with this kit. I fermented some dill pickles. Fantastic. If you've never had fermented dill pickles, I recommend that you try it. Let me get the jar out of the fridge and I'll show you. Here's our fermented dill pickles that we did. So good. See, they got the grape leaf and the garlic on the bottom. Once I tasted these, I was brought back to my childhood. They got that nice salty, sour flavor that you expect in the old-time dill pickles. They're so good. And now that I got this jar out, I'm going to have a couple. They've got even better, sitting in the fridge for another couple weeks. Fantastic. Well, let's get back on those peppers. We figured out real quick we were going to need our 2-quart jar or half-gallon jar instead of our quart jar. So now we've got all of our jalapenos in there. We've stuffed the jar fairly full because we want it to stay up right to the top so our weight doesn't fall down inside. So we're going to make our brine. So brine you need to do by weight. You need 2% salt brine by weight. So the easiest way to do that is with a kitchen scale. I've got 800 grams of water in this jar. I zeroed it with the jar, so it's just weighing the water. So for 2%, that would be 2 grams of salt per every 100. So we need 16 grams of salt into this jar. All right, ended up with 18 grams, but that's fine. It's not going to hurt us any. The finer the salt you use, the quicker it'll dissolve. But you want to stir this until it turns clear. Don't use any iodized salt and don't use any chlorinated water. If your water's chlorinated, put it in a vessel and let it sit out overnight and the chlorine will evaporate overnight. While we're waiting for that salt to dissolve a little bit, let's come check on our green taco sauce. Everything's cooking down nicely. I've turned it down to a simmer so it doesn't boil too hard. Everything's getting really soft. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to continue to cook this. Boy, I wish you could smell it. It smells amazing. Put the lid back on that. Looks like our salt is all dissolved. The reason you want to make sure it's dissolved, if you pour this in here and you leave salt in the bottom of the jar that's not dissolved, your ratio of your brine is going to be incorrect. So let's pour this brine in here. If we need to make more, we will make more. Yeah, it looks like we need to make another jar, which we need to make some anyway because we got another jar we're going to put together with something different. We got the right amount of peppers and liquid in the jar. We put our little glass puck on top and just make sure that those peppers stay down in the liquid, which they will. Then we're going to put one of our little burp tops on here, and then a regular canning ring. And then this is just going to sit over here in the corner for a week or two. We'll taste them along the way, see if we like the flavor profile. Now we're going to do something different with these. We're going to make some hot sauce, but if you wanted to preserve your peppers, you could just leave them like that after they're fermented. Put a regular lid on it, throw it in the fridge. They'll last up to a year, and then you can just pull those jalapenos out as you need them to use in recipes. But which we may be doing if we get enough hot sauce out of our other thing that we're going to do right now. We might just leave those like that so we can use the jalapenos throughout the year. So in this jar, we added all of our jalapenos once I washed them and popped the stems off of them. All I did was quarter them up, and we ended up with about a cup of habaneros in there. And then I put about 4 cloves worth of garlic in there. And then I probably put 2 cups of our sweet red and yellow peppers that we had from last year's garden that we had in the freezer. I thawed them out and threw them in there. And then I also added some of our canned carrots from last year just to give it just a little bit of sweetness. And then we're going to put our Mason tops lid on that. You can see everything's down below the liquid. And we'll put our burp lid on this and do the same as the other one. Now this is going to be our actual habanero hot sauce. So we're going to let that ferment as well for a couple weeks. And I promise you when we make that hot sauce, I'll come back and we'll discuss the whole process on that. Let's go check our green taco sauce here. Probably just about ready. It's cooked down quite a bit. Everything's nice and soft. I may give it a little bit more. Cook it down just a little bit more. And then we'll come back and take care of this. Looking and smelling really good. Now this is kind of what we're going to end up with right here. This green taco sauce. I really like this stuff. I buy it when I don't have that anymore. But what's really good is you get some refried beans, float some of this on top in a shallow dish with some Monterey Jack cheese, and throw it under the broiler and melt the cheese. Makes a fantastic bean dip. Well, we're at the point we're going to hit this with our Immersion Blender right here. That's what's good about these blenders. You can use them right in the pot. Start breaking some of that stuff up. Probably have to do it a couple times. Once it starts breaking up, you can kind of hold it in one spot and it'll kind of run the whole pot through like a propeller. Now make sure when you're using a blender that you don't get up here like this, because you'll make a mess all over your kitchen. Make sure it's down underneath. Like that. Now this taco sauce is obviously really good on any kind of Mexican dish, but I use it for lots of other stuff too. It's also really good if you mix it with some sour cream to whatever consistency you want and use that for a taco salad. That's really good as well. Alright folks, this green taco sauce is done. We don't need to cook it down any. It's plenty thick. Very nice consistency. It'll get a little bit thicker when it's cooled off. So what we're going to do now is just put this in pint jars and can it. And you've seen it canned a bunch of times. I'm not going to bore you with that process. But we've already tasted it. It's got the perfect profile, very nice balance of flavors. It did not need any salt or any more vinegar or anything like that. In fact, we're going to use some here on my late breakfast. A little bit of spice it up on my little cheesy eggs here. But fantastic on tacos. So we hope you've enjoyed this video rescuing our tomatoes, some of them, the green tomatoes from the garden, and our jalapenos. And like I said, I promise I'll bring you back when we do that hot sauce. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us on Mark Kelly Farm.